Hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy developments shaping the crypto world every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Gerald, how are you? Happy December.
Good afternoon. Happy December.
Yeah.
I
Good
am
afternoon
20
is
minutes off
depressing.
the
Yes.
tarmac here.
Yeah, I know.
So we're doing it live. I'm excited. Our award-winning top 100 crypto press partner, Eleanor, is also in flight today.
Yes.
So we're busy, but we're doing it live.
Yes, Eleanor was in Dubai. We are very proud of her for winning that award. No surprise that she won an award. And she is so gracious to still share her X feed as the live stream. We're just, a part of the product. So it's going to be a great show today. Just Gerald and I. And we're going to be breaking down a lot of news in a moment. And then we're bringing on two guests, Brian Shroder, the former Binance CEO, Binance US CEO, excuse me, who launched a new stablecoin network. And our other guest is Sarah Brennan, the general counsel at DeFi Ventures. But as always, let's kind of get started with the top headlines of the week. Bitnomial is set to become the first derivatives exchange in the US and is going to be offering spot crypto trading under CFTC regulation. According to a November 13th filing, the rules officially went into effect on Friday. And then it was essentially confirmed by CFTC Chair Caroline Pham that it'll begin next week. And this is a statement from her. So, I mean, I think this is pretty huge. Gerald, what's your take?
Yeah, this is exciting. I mean, it's a long time coming. I think we also broke this scoop previously. So just
Mhm.
more confirmation news on Crypto in America, Big J journalism. Very exciting. I mean, look, I think we've been looking for formal kind of spot registration regulation for a while. Good to see. We still have a lot of different products like perps to see where those end up with the CFTC, and good to see Acting Chair Pham continuing to push forward as Mike Seelig goes through his confirmation process as well. So
Yeah.
all good news on this front.
How important is the relationship with the CFTC on this front? Because, like, the fact that it is kind of in association with it or fully in association, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so spot this is one of those places where there's a little bit of overlap between the SEC and CFTC, but CFTC has uh, more frequently been the regulator and is getting pushed in that direction to deal with these like spot
Mhm.
derivatives and commodities assets. So this is firmly like CFTC territory. And then I think just going off the back of what we saw from the SEC over the last few weeks with the Chair Atkins speech on taxonomy, we saw the two no action letters. I think I may have said this last week, but like we're increasingly seeing the SEC kind of even without legislation, taking a pretty proactive stance on what they think is not sort of their territory. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it'll be exciting again, like as the CFTC continues to sort of ramp up action here. And like I said, Chair Pham continuing to push out all these efforts while we're slimmed down over there
Yeah.
is definitely good to see.
I got one question for you before we move on. Do you leverage trade?
No.
Is this a product for you, Gerald?
I am so boring. I think I'm not quite as boring as Eleanor, but I am so
Hey,
boring.
hey, Eleanor's
Yeah.
not boring. She just doesn't touch
Her
crypto.
trading her
That's the
trading
difference.
activity. Yeah. No, I am
Yeah.
just long hold, don't look, never sell, very boring.
Same. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I joke I'm too loyal to these coins. Too
Yeah.
loyal. Yeah, I'm just I'm a community member, as they call
Yeah.
me. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Citadel Securities sent a letter to the SEC arguing that some DeFi systems resemble traditional exchanges and should face comparable oversight. Citadel said that any exemptions for DeFi should follow a formal rulemaking process, warning that uneven oversight between tokenized and traditional markets could undermine investor protections. This brought some heat, I would say, from the crypto market, including Uniswap's Hayden Adams, among others, who denounced the letter, saying it mischaracterized open source developers as intermediaries and reflected a broader resistance to decentralized infrastructure. We also have a fun clip that we want to play on this note as well, from, I believe, Kevin, or sorry,
Ken Griffin,
Ken Griffin
crypto
from
villain all the way back to
Citadel.
the Constitution DAO days.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk to Sarah a little bit later about that. But Yeah, I was like very interesting to see both of these kind of in the same week. So let's start with like the Citadel sort of
Mhm.
legal argument here. I think one of the biggest challenges the industry has is this is very much like a like liquidity for me, but not for the kind of
Mm.
stance that they can take. Um, the argument that they made is essentially that uh, doing carve outs for broker dealer exemptions and that kind of thing for DeFi protocols that are, in their words, bringing buyers and sellers together really kind of misinterprets the technology around DeFi. It doesn't. It basically treats these protocols as some kind of like active intermediary. So usually, when you have a market being created like this, there's much more facilitation. So the argument has always been that DeFi is truly peer to peer. If
Mhm.
you're running, obviously, if you're going through front ends or things like that, it's a little bit different. But really, at the end of the day, these dexes are just pieces of technology where people are kind of meeting each other, right, as opposed to actual facilitation of trades. And the other kind of, I think, sort of hypocrisy on this stance specifically is that this is also the same firm that pays for order flow that nobody else gets to see. So this
Mhm.
argument for kind of transparency in these markets
Not in
is
the
like
business model.
a
Yeah.
little ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that like the people are that are this is kind of a tangent, but the people that are actually going to get ZK done are going to be the hedge funds because they don't want their trading activity to be private or to be public, like open source on the blockchain, right? You shouldn't be able to go see Citadel's buying and selling of assets on chain. And so there's like a big argument for zero knowledge for institutional finance. And yeah, I think we can probably hop into that clip.
Yeah, let's play the
Cut.
clip. Roll the clip,
Yeah, let's
as they
do it.
say.
One of the other things that is flying right now, I mean, flying, is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
Really?
little
We're going to
outdated
end
here.
on this?
What do you
I
think?
thought we had like a fun conversation. Is this like my exit tax?
Is crypto is not fun to you?
I still. Look. Here's the problem. I own canvases covered with oil. Canvas probably costs $15. The oil paint probably costs $20. That's $35
That is not
sort
true,
of
by
net
the way.
cost.
But that's okay.
Some of these paints trade for
That's
tens of millions
billionaire
of
math.
dollars.
Yeah.
Who am I to judge crypto?
Well, that is true. But you've been asked to judge crypto for a very long time, and you've judged it by not buying it.
Yes, and what a mistake that's been.
So do
I
you
love
wish
it.
you had?
Okay. And do you?
Mm.
Yeah. So just a little, Jamie Dimon, got the about face first, and it looks like Ken's. I mean, it is kind of a nuanced stance that he took, which is, I don't necessarily have to see the extrinsic value of an asset for that asset to have value, right?
Yeah.
And as he mentioned, he is one of the biggest sort of art collectors out there. That like $25-$35 raw materials for paints, that reminds me of Arrested Development, the quote, like, it's a banana,
It's
Michael.
what
What
can
could
it
it cost?
cost? Yeah.
$10?
I thought
Yeah,
the
no,
same
like,
thing,
no,
yeah.
pain is expensive. But
Literally, yeah.
the about face there, or at least just a recognition, right? Like
Mhm.
really interesting to see. And maybe that combined with some of the other things that Citadel is doing, trying to move certain things on chain in the future, tokenized equities, everybody's getting excited about new rails. So yeah, coming around. We'll
Yeah.
see how it goes.
I feel like I always
Slowly.
see these like deal book summit interviews that is sitting down with an executive like him, and they're always like, "Do you regret buying or not buying crypto?" Or "What are your thoughts on crypto?" And it's always this like funny little clip. And I feel like it's kind of evolving into exactly what we just saw there with Ken, right? Not
Yeah.
Kevin, Ken.
Have you ever sat down with someone in like a moderator
Uh-huh.
appearance you were doing and had them say something just like really surprising?
I think so for sure. I mean, like that's always what you want. You want people to not just give the talking points in the script that they always give. I actually was saying this, I think, off camera to you guys a while ago, but I always found that Brad Garlinghouse was like that. He's like extremely good at just being human.
Yeah.
And so many times when you have these CEOs that are so massive and they almost seem like untouchable, they kind of lose their human aspect to them. So when you get them in that position and they start acting like a normal person, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And maybe that's like supreme media training. I don't even know. Like that's like the next level where it's like, oh my God, they're like a human and they were trained to be like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the
Do you
conspiracy
think
theory part.
Citadel did some like viewer sentiment studies on whether or not
And they
he
told him he
should?
had to say
Yeah,
something
yeah.
on
The
that.
Citadel
Yeah.
marketing team was like, yeah, Ken, you
No,
gotta
I
bite the
don't
bullet on
know.
this one. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to see his perspective and then like Jamie Dimon's change over the years too. And it's also like sometimes what they say doesn't even go with what their company is doing, right? Because
Yeah.
like with Jamie Dimon, I felt like, JP Morgan has like what the Onyx chain or something like that. And
Yeah.
then like he's kind of, for lack of a better word, shitting on crypto for so many years, right?
Yeah,
But
and the argument to make is always like the assets are not the technology. And it's like, yeah, that's fair.
yeah,
But it's also interesting. I mentioned Constitution DAO earlier, just a bit of lore there. So a couple of my buddies are the guys who started that project, and so that was one of the craziest like 6-day periods of my life.
yeah.
A lot of people don't know, or the speculation was that Ken Griffin's son has actually been into crypto for some time,
Hmm.
and essentially flagged this Constitution DAO thing to him, and that's how he ended up getting the Constitution. So he's been just in and around the degens for a while on the periphery, and so maybe we'll find out that Ken owns some Bitcoin at some point.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe his son will kind of make the
Yeah.
push. Yeah. All right, let's move on to Connecticut. I was actually going to put CT here, but I think that would have confused some of our viewers. Essentially, what happened, Connecticut's Department of Consumer Protection issued a cease and desist order to Kalshi, Robinhood, and Crypto.com, accusing them of conducting unlicensed online gambling, specifically in sports wagering. In a public statement, they said that prediction market platforms offering sport event contracts are illegal and put consumers' money and information at risk. We also have a quote from the Department of Consumer Protection Gaming Commissioner Brian Caffarelli arguing that none of them have licenses on this front, and if they did, it violates state policies.
Yeah.
Mm,
So this is not new.
yeah.
Just as far as the state level, right? So I think last week we covered Nevada, talking about basically doing the same thing.
Hmm.
The difference there is probably that Nevada just has such an entrenched sort of gaming industry.
Yeah,
So
they
it's
got Las
interesting to see
Vegas. Come on.
Connecticut, yeah, take this stand. So there's a cease and desist. I think a lot of this comes, and basically they were also arguing that there were some of the age restrictions on gambling that weren't being applied to prediction markets either. What this is actually going to come down to, I think, where this is going to culminate is in market structure. There's federal preemption, which is very important for cases like this. So Robinhood, Kalshi, Polymarket have all been relying on a federal regulatory regime where
Mm,
prediction markets are doing futures, CFTC registered futures, and the states are coming in. I think Maryland actually did something similar, and saying that, look, no, this is gambling. We think it's gambling, and it's going to result, I think, either in some really good precedent, because I think Kalshi also immediately sued Connecticut, countersued, saying, no, we have federal clarity here.
mm,
You guys can't do anything. And states in the history, we actually fought a war about this a while back,
mhm,
of what states could and couldn't regulate.
yeah,
And so it's going to be interesting to see this play out both in the courts and just kind of public opinion. And then the
mhm.
last thing on this is the way that they're marketing it. I think some of these platforms have gotten really, really bold. So I have seen, I think, platforms in like Instagram ads actually using the word bet, and like
Yeah,
you can't have both, guys.
yeah.
You
I've been
gotta,
getting a
yeah.
lot of Kalshi ads on TikTok. It's the same
Yeah.
ad over and over and over, yeah, and I'm like, "I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it." But the way Kalshi kind of, like, advertise it, in my opinion, is it's very, um, playful, and it doesn't come off as, like, sports betting or anything that would kinda be seen in that category. It's more like, "Oh, here's a fun topic that, you could talk and bet on with your friends." I don't even think they say the word bet, to be honest. But then you
Yeah.
just said they say it. So maybe I'm, like, so like, the marketing is so good that you kind of ignore the fact that they're advertising this betting thing, right?
Yeah, it's like that's, I remember Robinhood going after mobile so hard back in like during the pandemic, and it's like, yeah, it was just fun. Like I've
Mhm.
talked to our product guys about this before. where what's happening on the back end is very complicated. Like if buying a fractional share of something is very complicated. But yeah, when you get that green button and you hit it and you get the confetti, you're like, no, that was great. Now I own 0.2 shares of Tesla. Like it's it's definitely going to be interesting to see
Yeah.
where this goes.
Kalshi also faced similar enforcement actions in other states this year, including Arizona, Illinois, Montana, and Ohio. And kind of going off what you said, they previously argued that in its events contracts, they fall exclusively under federal oversight. And that differs, from traditional state licensed sport books.
Yeah.
And then, the CFTC also gave federal approval to platforms like Kalshi and Polymarket, which Polymarket wasn't included in the Connecticut cease and desist letter, which was interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how they sort of chose those counterparties. Maybe that's a scoop we can get in the future. But
they're cool.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see that play out for sure.
Yeah. I also just think a big topic of discussion on the front of these prediction markets too is that like it's too accessible. Like there used to be this social aspect of like you fly to Vegas or you drive to the casino and then you go with your friends and you say, okay, we have a set amount of money we're going to spend. Hopefully, you guys know how to control yourself. But now it's just like you could wake up, you could bet, you could go out, you could bet. It's too accessible in my opinion.
Well, and if you remember, so we are talking about gambling now, right? But there was a big difference in especially, DraftKings, FanDuel, all these apps. Like I remember when New York approved gambling, it was like a huge kind of opening of the market. There's certain states where you can, there's certain states where you got to go, outside of federal jurisdiction to some extent, like Indian reservations, that kind of thing. And so I think what could happen here is we could have a carve out for sports specifically. I don't know how, because that's a big aspect of this, is how the sports leagues themselves actually perceive whether you're calling it prediction markets or gambling, having that activity on their platform or just associated with their brand, right? So there was this huge federal case about gambling in the NBA and point shaving that caught up quite a few like big names, brought the mafia back. I think people forgot that they still exist. But so it'll be interesting to see, like, as these markets continue to evolve and we see more and more volume going to prediction markets rather than maybe traditional gambling apps, how sports kind of deals with this. Because I think obviously everybody wants to bet or to really what it comes down to is are you smarter than everybody else, right? That's like why people do this in general.
What's your edge?
And
Exactly.
so we'll see.
All right. Well, let's move on to the last headline before we bring on our first guest. The SEC has sent letters to 9 issuers of high leverage ETFs, including some proposed crypto ETFs over potential risk concerns. The letter sent Tuesday halted the review of funds until these concerns were addressed by issuers. One of the 9 issuers was ProShares, which has its leverage crypto ETF product on the market, which is interesting. My first take on this was kind of like, if it's already in the market, how do you halt that? I know not all of them are, but I'm not necessarily sure how this works. So
so this is, and we'll have to have Greg X back on the show to dig into this. And this one I think can get pretty wonky pretty fast. So to your point, I mean, you can ask issuers to delist ETFs if you think that they're violating provisions. This specific provision that the SEC is enforcing is Rule 18F4, I believe. And so it's a little wonky, but essentially, if you're using leverage in an ETF, you have to refer to some kind of a benchmark. And what the SEC is essentially saying is that the benchmarks that some of these ETFs are using are not kosher, and so it's not a fair representation of the risk of the assets. And so I think we've seen this with DATs. We've seen this with warnings about insider trading on some of these life sciences companies that were getting acquired when we were in DAT mania over the summer. And so this is kind of one of the like push and pulls of when you have a ton of regulatory action happening in a short period of time. It takes time when a regulator says, we think this is okay. And then the market does market things and people kind of push the envelope or get creative. And the regulator has to step in and say, okay, well, it's not it's not crime season, right? Like you do still need to
It's not.
follow the rules here. And I think they're going to evolve, because it also it's very hard to benchmark crypto assets on existing data and traditional markets. Like it's kind of a just different space. And so it'll be interesting to see like how the markets react to this and how the industry kind of figures this out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to our first guest. I'm excited to have her on. Her name is Sarah Brennan. She is the general counsel at Delphi Ventures. We've been talking about DeFi, that my mind is mixed up. She will join us to be talking about regulation, her outlook, and everything else in between. Sarah, welcome on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. Thanks for jumping in. A lot to talk about. And so I want to start off with your kind of like history in crypto, and like as a former sort of corporate and securities attorney. You came into crypto a while back, pretty OG, LexPunk, Decentralized Research Center, lots of different activity on that front. What were the hardest sort of legal paradigms to reconcile between like TradFi and that background and what you saw happening in crypto when you got started, just being a lawyer in the space?
I think that every corporate transactional lawyer is very used to everything being in a box and people come to you for certainty. And in this space, you genuinely can't provide that to them, which is very unsettling. And we realized pretty quickly, right, that you could have credible theories on, non-security status or sort of how to roll out a protocol and comply with law the best you could. But ultimately, the power of the state, right, determines, might is right. And so even if the regulators, the SEC, most prominently over the years is espousing positions that you think are fundamentally incorrect, you would have to litigate that, which I think is something that, us corporate and transactional attorneys had never experienced before.
On the front of uncertainty, though, do you feel like maybe there is a bit more certainty now that we're kind of getting these? No, you're shaking your head.
Nothing's really happened yet. Until there is legislation or actual rulemaking, this stuff is very ephemeral. And nothing that we have seen protects us from sort of state level action and plaintiffs' firms. That's only something that can be achieved through SEC rulemaking or a legislative framework. Or obviously a combination of the legislative framework plus sort of regulatory regimes at SEC, CFTC, and throughout every other agency from there, right?
Yeah, so I'm curious, like you just covered kind of the big three ways that we get rules in America, right? Is either I litigate, so I sue you and we figure it out, and that's very expensive and takes a lot of time. And there's only a handful of firms who have really been able to fight that fight. We've had Paul Graywall from Coinbase on the show before. We've talked about the Ripple suit, so we know how litigation goes. I don't think anybody wants that to be the way that we get regulatory certainty here. Then there's rulemaking, and then of course there's the legislation. We got Genius, but now we're going through implementation, and there's still some controversy on that. How are you feeling about going into like what we got done this year? Because I know you said like nothing's really happened yet. So how do you feel about what we got done this year, and then where we can go next year? Just knowing that I think I can say, I don't know what the prediction markets are saying, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to get a bill signed by December 31st.
You're not betting on it? No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, I think market structure is very far away still. I came into this year really hoping that we would make progress on rulemaking for a safe harbor. Gerald knows I've tried this over the course of 4 years several times to get something like that. Oh, did I freeze?
No,
You're there. You're there for me.
And okay, cool. And at the start of this year, we did another effort with a working group on just a transitionary safe harbor, because it seemed like the right atmosphere with sort of the SEC dismissing with prejudice Ripple's action, that they would kind of try and take a similar market approach. And the proposal was, in exchange for disclosures, some compliance, you kind of get that absolution from how you launched in a sort of transition regime. I think there are so many different priorities, and I think the SEC has been pulled away by the glitz and glam of tokenized equity. It's a much bigger market, and so there is competition for their attention. And of course, there's traditional markets as well. And so we are looking to see what that innovation exemption comes out as. Recent speeches suggest that might deal with tokenized equity. I don't know if it's going to be more broad than that and cover everything everyone wants. But Chairman Atkins had indicated the other day that it's going to be tailored. So who knows? And is it a pilot program? Is it rulemaking? So many questions here, not much in the way of answers yet. So on the issues that I really care about, I haven't seen as much progress as I'd hoped, which are just taxonomy and the safe harbor. We've been asking for the safe harbor since the SEC declared token securities, because you've had these insurmountable problems with them declaring Section 5 violations, and you have the issues around 12G, and so that's really what I would like to see out of any sort of SEC rulemaking effort coming into next year.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's kind of trying to predict what's going to happen in 2026, what will pass, etc. And I feel like throughout this year, we've heard a lot of people thinking that certain things would go through, and then the deadlines kept getting pushed and pushed. And now it's just a conversation of, oh, we don't even know if it's going to happen anymore or when it's going to happen. Right. So is there any like major bet that you have on the regulatory front that you think will kind of either define next year, or like that you're really hoping does? I mean, you talked about the safe harbor part, but maybe something else too that, we've maybe discussed in the past.
Yeah, this could change weekly.
Of course.
But I was, happy with clarity. It wasn't perfect. A lot of work went into it. I thought the front half of the bill was pretty strong and nuanced with the non-exclusive safe harbors, the maturity arcs. I think it was put a lot of effort into that, along with everybody else. They decided to start over. I think that is a decision that will stand in history here a bit. I think this current bill is very far away. They have brackets where the DeFi provision should go in, and they have brackets where AML KYC should go in. And those have historically been the sort of issues that have fractured the industry and support. So we'll see. But I don't know if you noticed me foreshadowing that I'm looking for SEC rulemaking to solve our going to market issue with more safeguards for people coming in. I know that people, exchanges are launching ICO. I don't know if they're products, right? Offerings, just going ahead because it's a permissive environment. But I'd like to see that out of the SEC, some more firmness for issuers.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the public launch question. I think that's really interesting. We've seen a couple pretty big public sales, I guess you could call them. Yeah, maybe ICO like products come out in the last few weeks. So I want to get to that. But you also just made a really important point. I think on the show before, I've called it the 180-page bill that was actually 155 pages. The Senate Ag draft that came out. what I think maybe some of our viewers or maybe just like normal people who aren't sort of super wonky on this stuff forget or maybe don't understand is how much sort of jurisdictional incongruity there is just even within figuring out whose job it is to propose language around some of the stuff, right? So the Senate Ag draft, basically what I've been hearing is they want to kick a bunch of this to Senate banking and have Senate banking figure it out because they're not sure that all this stuff is necessarily within like Senate Ag's wheelhouse. How do you think like we'll get a Senate banking draft at some point? And how do you just think about the difference between like how Congress tries to kind of not necessarily, it seems like sometimes they're trying to pass the buck and sometimes they're trying to take the buck, right? Depending on how the job is going. But what do you think about just the way the Senate Ag draft came out and like where we can see people sort of step in and gap fill outside of the rulemaking?
So do you mean in terms of the bill itself, like from
Yeah,
here
like
on?
what gaps do you think could potentially be filled by Senate banking? And like, do you kind of agree with Senate Ag sort of punting on a lot? There's a lot of brackets in that bill.
I think if I were the Dems, I would be reticent to share discussion thoughts, and I think they are, and they're kind of still in re-strategizing here, and I think there's an education element there. There's a nervousness to move forward on language, so I think some of that's the brackets. And I think the AML KYC pieces are going to be the topic of a lot more negotiation. I think they're stressful for the industry. And, Republicans and Dems can be fairly aggro on what they're looking for. And there's a lack of understanding on how the tech works and what permissionlessness is, because the impetus is always to try and hang your hat on there being an intermediary and find one. And when there truly isn't one, our system, our KYC AML system kind of breaks down absent, a move to know your transaction or something that's going to be more synergistic for on-chain transactions. That's kind of a leap, right? And that would be non-parity of treatment. And obviously traditional finance has been more and more vocal and in the conversation as well. And so I think it's just a longer negotiation there. On things like DeFi, it's really hard to right size what's going to be in the bill. So DeFi wants preemption, right? In order to have preemption, you cannot, in my opinion, I don't think it's convincing to say, well, if I meet the definition of DeFi, whatever it's going to be, then I am not in a federal or state framework and I get preemption. I just don't think that's viable. But a lot of people over the years have suggested that some sort of notice and disclosure framework might be a middle path, sort of exempt reporting is what I'm calling it now. For opting into that, the CFTC is not a good regulator of tech risk anyway, but there will be some degree of minimal intermediary-like risk at that app layer because you can't ossify the tech. You could try, but so then they could regulate to sort of what that retained intermediary risk might look like, but it'd be a much smaller footprint. That's just one idea. I think we just need to keep, if people hate that, I think we just need to keep coming up with sort of ideas, because I do think if we don't speak to DeFi, what's going to happen is the CFTC is still going to regulate it. The SEC is still going to regulate it. Everybody else is still going to regulate it. And the states are. And that's not a great position to be in either. It's just a hard issue. And one of the things that it will be required is some degree of line drawing of sort of people that have models that constitute DeFi, and then people that the government is going to determine sort of fall on more. They look more like intermediaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, last thing, Sarah, before we let you go, obviously Delphi Ventures works with a lot of portfolio companies ranging from financial apps to crypto, blockchains, infrastructure, AI, gaming, etc. I read the website. How are you thinking about advising these portfolio companies and just kind of like on the American landscape going into 2026?
Yeah, I mean, like just personally as a lawyer, I was alluding to this, I don't play God for other people. I think as a founder, as a each of these companies, they have counsel, they decide what their risk appetite is. Sort of we go over the atmosphere is friendlier at the SEC level. It is actually come and talk to us and don't go to jail. But you don't have certainty there yet. So you kind of have to determine risk appetite. And, I have seen people start saying, and I'll say this is like sort of on the ICO platform front, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to block New York.
Mhm.
So, like, people are determining their risk appetite. I think the vibe that I get, and this is outside of our portcos, is that you have to make a attempt to like sort of be big enough to have defense budget on the back end, right? I don't
Yep.
think that dynamic has changed, right? I just think who is being active at coming after people has changed a bit, right?
Mhm.
And we just tell people generally like be good actors, do the best you can out there and just determine your risk appetite. Yeah.
I love it. Amazing. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
having
on.
me.
Good to see you.
All right. That was Sarah Brennan, the general counsel of Delphi Ventures, not DeFi Ventures. Apparently, I can't speak today. But our next guest is going to be the former Binance US CEO, Brian Shroder. He has officially launched his new stablecoin network, One Money. It raised over $20 million in seed funding. We are excited to have him on to dive into this, his views on stablecoins, and everything else. Brian, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Having led Binance US and as its CEO, and now you're running a stablecoin network provider, you've kind of seen firsthand probably the regulatory landscape in crypto
Mhm.
in the US, right? How has that experience
Of
kind of
course.
shaped the way you approach compliance and risk management today?
Yeah. So, having lived through the last 5 years of crypto in the United States, it's been quite a wild ride. And I think that what we focused when we created One Money was actually to overinvest in legal and compliance from the very get go. We're building a company that is able to withstand any kind of administration changes, violently swinging one way or the other, but also doing so in the context of a global compliance program as well. And so that's just something that was always important for us to get right from the beginning.
Mhm.
Yeah, Brian, you also kind of pre-crypto helped scale mobile payments financial services at Ant Group and Uber in Southeast Asia. I think we've talked before about how slow the US occasionally is in adopting financial innovation. Like I think I remember going to the UK or something and seeing like a RFID chip, even going back that
Mm,
far.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the US can learn from markets outside that you mentioned like a global compliance infrastructure? What do you think we can learn from adoption out there on digital payments? And what do you think is holding us back from moving faster on this?
yeah. It's funny, if you Google the world's first blockchain remittance corridor, that was actually Ant Financial in Asia 7 years ago. And so that was in my markets moving money between Hong Kong and the Philippines. And so here we are 7 years later, and we're really just starting to still scratch the surface of what money movement can be on chain. And so I think that what is amazing now is that we have this environment in the United States where crypto and money are actually becoming a lot more synonymous. And so people are a lot more comfortable moving money. And in the future, people won't even know, like my mom or my sister using a banking app in the future, won't even know that their money is actually being transmitted on crypto or blockchain rails. And so I think that we're just beginning to see the very tip of the iceberg in terms of the massive movement into the on-chain world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know we also have a graphic here that Gerald put in. It kind of goes into what the adoption looks like on a global ranking.
Yeah,
And
so and maybe I can just tee this up a little bit. So there's our
yeah.
friends over at TRM Labs put out this stable adoption map. I think it was interesting. The US is number 2,
Hmm.
but you can see some of the rankings there. Brian, what do you think? I mean, we talk about Bitcoin adoption in these like hyperinflationary markets and that kind of stuff. What do you think, having been in that fintech, and I think actually in a past life through Aflac Ventures forever ago, we invested in Ant Financial, so familiar with that product. What do you think the digital payments rails look like in developing countries? Like, why do you think some are so much faster to move than others?
Yeah, I think so. I was an executive at Uber, overseeing business in Asia. And at the time, we really invested in trying to create a magical experience for users. And one of the most magical experiences at Uber was getting out of the car, not having to physically grab your wallet. And so we originally started, when we launched in Asia, spending time with banks, just as we do in the United States, so that people could have their credit cards. But we quickly figured out that most people in Asia don't use cards. They use mobile payments or e-wallets. And so we pivoted very hard into fintech solutions. And that is actually one of the reasons that Uber was able to, expand quite quickly into the region and be successful. And so I think that what we're seeing in the United States is just the very beginning of moving into more mobile payments. And I think that stablecoin infrastructure is what's going to lead that. And so in the future, a lot of our fintech apps will be powered by stablecoin and blockchain. And so I see it personally as a way for almost the United States to catch up to a lot of the innovation that has been happening in the fintech space in markets like Asia.
Mm-hmm. Maybe giving reach to the analogy that you just gave on Uber, getting out of the car, you don't need to take out your wallet, etc. And that's kind of like a aha moment or like a special thing that I think a lot of people overlook is like how simplified and easy our lives have become. On the stablecoin front, how do you kind of see that analogy applying, and like where do you really want it to go within the US market and maybe more globally as well?
Yeah, I think that what we're committed to at One Money is bringing stablecoins to the masses. And so we're doing that through our technology. OneMoney.com just launched this week, and our tagline is Stablecoin Simplified. Our goal is to provide a very seamless, simple way for users to receive, buy, sell, convert, send, and store stablecoins. And then we're also innovating when it comes to pricing. So this is something that has been talked about in the community for years and years. But effectively, if you wanted to use stablecoin infrastructure solutions, you would have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars per month, right? Anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per month to even access services. And by the way, even if you don't use those services, you still have to pay the $3,000 to $10,000 a month. So one of the biggest innovations that I think One Money is trying to bring to the market is we were the first stablecoin platform to have zero platform fees. And so what that means for our users is, for the first time ever, you don't get charged monthly minimums or spending requirements. You don't have to pay for opening an account. We don't charge you for custody or maintenance or balance. And so you really truly pay for what you use and what you consume. And we see this as an amazing entry point for small and medium-sized businesses, or for even corporations that just want to experiment with stablecoins before they fully have to commit to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in this space.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to allow users and consumers and companies to experiment with the technology. I think the example you brought up of Uber is very interesting, like noticing that sort of insight and say, hey, people are just on mobile. That's what we need to do, because you're able to create a really nice user experience. We've been talking for years in crypto about the solution to mass adoption is actually like bury the blockchain, right? Like have people not even necessarily know that they're interacting with on-chain rails in a system. With stablecoins, it feels like we're getting closer. How far away do you think we are from that, where it's like, I open something and it's it's settled in stables, and I didn't even realize, that was what was going on.
I think we're almost there. Certainly, we're there from a technology and infrastructure perspective. We can do that today. What we are missing is some of the larger corporations just jumping in and adopting it in their own ecosystems. And so right now, what you see is the most innovative companies committing to building out their infrastructure using blockchains and stablecoins. But this is something that I think will permeate throughout the entire ecosystem over the next couple of years, so that, as you said, people won't even know that their entire payment backend is powered by stablecoins and blockchains.
Mm-hmm. Now that we have the Genius Act in motion, are there any specific partnerships with banks, fintechs, or these e-commerce enterprise merchants that you're eyeing now? Or are they coming in? Is it kind of like what's the dance
Yeah,
here? Yeah.
it's such a different world now. So when I was CEO of Binance US, we had hundreds of millions of dollars on our balance sheet, and I, for the life of me, could not get banks to call us back towards
Yeah.
the very end of the regulatory crackdown. Now it's quite the opposite. We are getting inbound calls from banks that are curious about what One Money tech stack looks like, how they can incorporate that, where we can support them. And so it is a true reversal in this space, which is obviously quite exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the switch was really just the regulatory clarity, or was it something else that kind of drove that?
I think in the United States, in particular, the regulatory clarity is without a doubt one of the most important differentiations. And then I think that just the broader acceptance in the consumer space around one token of a stablecoin is a dollar in the consumer's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's still some friction though with rolling out Genius around certain features like staking rewards and things like that, trying to I guess I don't think it's level the playing field, but because the playing field is pretty
Great.
unlevel.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe TradFi trying to take a stance here. In terms of the stack that you guys have built, it's pretty interesting that you're able to offer all those different components in that kind of a no fee structure, right? So what do you think is like the biggest point of friction with rolling out a system like this? Because it does involve a ton of compliance, involves a lot of lawyers, right? How do you
Yes.
think with Genius rolling out that we can either reduce those friction points, or like, do you think custody is one of the challenges, or we've talked about the user experience? Like, what do you see as the hardest part of this stack?
I think that a lot of these services are going to go to zero. And so we, from the very beginning, built this company around being able to operate in an extremely low-cost environment. And we were very conscientious of how we structured the company so that we could maintain a price point that we think is extremely competitive and allows people to come into the space that previously weren't able to access it at the historical price points. And so I think that you have to have that mentality when building the company and just be, I guess, cost conscious. And so that's just something that we did from the very beginning.
Brian, I also wanted to ask you kind of your take on the current stablecoin market. USDT is the largest, and then USDC, and then we have a bunch of other players. But we also see a lot of firms starting to issue their own stablecoins.
Yes.
Do you kind of see a shift in the market happening in 2026 or beyond, where it's no longer these two massive players dominating, but we actually see new entrants taking control, or not control,
Yes.
but like gaining market share?
Gaining traction 1,000%. I'm a person that believes that in the future we're going to have thousands of stablecoins, because when you do the math as a corporation, especially as a conglomerate, it makes complete sense for you to have your own stablecoin, even just for your own ecosystem. And so I think that more and more companies will have their own stablecoins. I think that as a community, we need to focus on interoperability. But the economics just make so much sense for especially large corporations to jump feet first into this space and create a stablecoin themselves.
Mhm. And how do you kind of think about engaging with like, the Visas, the PayPals, even
Mm,
Venmos of the world? Is there kind of an opportunity for One Money or stablecoin networks
yeah.
as a whole to really kind of work with them or outpace them? And how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, so I think that we will be working with them for sure. But we also, as One Money, we provide a lot of technology solutions in stablecoins across the entire life cycle of the stablecoin itself. And so One Money, you can think of as almost having two different business units. One is our purpose-built blockchain that we have built literally from scratch to be optimized just for stablecoin payments. And then the second is our most recent product launch, which is onemoney.com. So
Mhm.
in many ways, when you pair the purpose-built blockchain that we have for stablecoins with the infrastructure of onemoney.com and our developer APIs, we basically are giving the tools for any stablecoin company or any fintech in the world to be able to replicate what PayPal has done with PYUSD, working with Solana in their own ecosystem. And so we see us as being able to give an edge to fintechs and maybe even some historical TradFi firms that are looking to compete in this space.
Mhm.
And so, Brian, you're not an issuer, is that right? Like you're not going to sit in that role formally,
We are not issuing
right?
stablecoins. We're supporting issuers globally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I had that right before I got your thoughts on one of the criticisms that stablecoins get, and especially under the Genius framework, is that it puts a lot of T-bills and money market funds on corporate balance sheets. Obviously, this is not a new thing, and of course, like foreign sovereigns and foreign governments also, of course, are big holders of U.S. debt, and it's kind of been sort of the grease of the financial economy for like the last century. What do you think of the criticisms around, as that chart continues to go up, that we had up, just on total capitalization, and then also relative to sort of total dollars outstanding? Do you see any risk in having that kind of concentrated sort of purchase of T-bills? Do you think that may have an impact on like inflation down the road? Like, what do you think of sort of that argument?
No, I don't. I don't see any risk. This is obviously the United States government, and so these T-bills are backed by the security of the U.S., which I think hopefully we're all comfortable with. But I think that this sort of model, though, is not new. I remember, talking to a gentleman in his 70s, explaining what we do at One Money, and he was like, "Oh, when I was growing up, my parents would take out their checkbook and
Yeah.
they would write checks at the grocery store. And that checkbook was getting, T-bill rates back then, parked in money market funds. And so effectively, we're digitizing that world, which people were comfortable with, many decades ago, which I think is obviously a huge win for the consumer. So to be able to get access to T-bill rates for payments, when bank rates, how many basis points do you get on your checking account, right? I think that this is a huge win for the consumer space if we do this well.
Mhm. Last thing, Brian, before we let you go, we actually talked about a crypto Christmas wish list, which is completely irrelevant to the question I'm about to ask you. But if you had something on your wish list for, let's say, 2026, obviously there's a lot of momentum behind stablecoins. What
Mm.
would be the top of the list? Like, what is the North Star to you for
I think
stable?
that I think that my wish list is companies experimenting with stablecoins across
Mhm.
their entire infrastructure. So experimenting with stablecoins in treasury, experimenting with stablecoins in terms of vendor payments. I'm really passionate about hopefully finding a company that wants to experiment with
Yeah,
paying their hourly employees every hour. So
yeah.
reach out to me
Oh,
if you're
wow.
one of those companies and we can do that.
There we
That's
go.
cool. Streaming payroll. That's super interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
I'm
love
very
cool.
that.
passionate about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love that our producers gave you this nice headline. Amazing. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on today, and congrats on the launch.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, Gerald. That's
Nice.
that's the show.
Yeah, yeah. So we need safe harbor,
Yes.
maybe no legislation, and we need
Mhm.
streaming payroll.
Yeah, I
those are
love it.
the
Amazing.
those are the goals for
Yeah.
2026.
I think we have over 7,000 people tuning in right now. So we just want to say a big thank you to you
Nice.
guys. Love you all. The show is for you. And if you ever have any comments or questions that you want to leave, let us know. And if it's a good one, we'll bring you up. Oh, thank you. You can't take all the winning. I actually saw this comment at the beginning of our live stream and I cracked up at the name. I love it. Can't
Nice.
take all the winning. That is literally kind of the motto you need to have on life. So, yeah. I mean, I think there's just a lot that has transpired this year and we still have like the month left, but it's kind of crazy thinking about what we have accomplished, not just our show, but like the people in the industry, right? And like
Yeah.
what's to come. And I think a lot of times, like maybe we don't appreciate what has actually like happened, right?
Yeah,
So
well, it's or what we still need to happen, right?
yeah, well,
So
there we go.
yeah, no, it's been an interesting year for sure. It's also, I mean, we got, you'll be at Breakpoint next week,
Mhm.
right? We've got the BA Policy Summit coming up next week.
Yeah.
We've got hopefully Mike Seelig getting confirmed, TBD. We'll see. And yeah, it's still early days. We're still early somehow. Somehow
Still
still
early. We're
early.
still allowed to say that? I
Yeah.
know that was like the slogan, but I don't know. I think we're still early, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you to everyone for listening in, and we will see you next week.
Thanks.